And as well, it expands out from there into all different directions, including things like finance. And what you see there, the GL account, site and location information, that relates it back to cost centers. So that whenever one person opens a ticket, you can say their cost center is this, which means you're going to charge their department for that. So when it costs $100 to move the table and chairs out of the room, then that equates back to their cost center and they get charged for that. This shows you kind of at the level of data. You can see what we have here, the user and security groups, security profiles that are built for users to say, in this application, this user can do this. You can be very granular and say, in one application, this user can do these kinds of things, and in another application, they can't. And you can also take that across some of the other things that you see there. So on this site, this user can do this, but on this site, the user can't. And a site would be things like the Purdue West Lafayette campus versus the Calumet campus versus IUPUI or whatever, so that a user can look at data that relates to sites that they've been authorized to see. And you can see the data restrictions, object attributes, collections, all those things. The product used to be designed so that customers had to create custom copies of an application. So the change application, for instance, would have to be rebuilt, and you would remove fields from the screen so they couldn't see them. But now what the product does with IBM is have these concepts of data restriction, so that all you have to do is toggle the groups, memberships that are responsible for those fields so that people can or can't see them. And this kind of gives you an example of one product. This is the Tivoli Service Automation Manager tool. And you can see out of the box they've created a bunch of different roles, and associated with those roles can be person groups and individual roles, and then security groups. And what you'll notice here in this green column is that security groups equate to your security source, which in our case is usually an LDAP of some sort. And so you'll create those security groups in LDAP, and the product equates those security groups back to the roles and person groups within the product. What kinds of things do you think people might be interested in doing? Well, one of the things that we have is this product set add-on that creates a service provider model, so that you can set up your company and say that you're really good at doing Maximo, the asset management, and you want to sell that out to other people. So we've created functionality within the product to restrict it so that you can be a service provider, and you can subcontract out for company A, company B, company C, company D, and when someone goes and logs in, they're restricted to their company's data. And when you run reports based on their company's data. It can be a little bit of a nightmare if you started to think you were relying on people to write queries that somehow were built properly to restrict the data so they wouldn't be pulling data from another customer. So it's most of the time no one is going to try to take that on their own. They're going to do that within the product. Another idea might be, I recently dealt with a government agency, the concept of classified. And so there's an application, the ability within the application for you to bootstrap on other applications. And in this case, they have a wizard, and the wizard says, push the button, the wizard pops up and says, does this data need to be restricted to top secret only? And they would answer that, and suddenly records would get populated within the data to say it's top secret. And then you would be restricting data within the product in a customized fashion then so that people who have top security clearance or above can see the top secret data, but other people can't. It has some kind of interesting implications when you start thinking about it, because if you're a just government employee working at the post office and you call and open a ticket against whatever government installation that it is, and you have some kind of clearance, and the person that opens your ticket for you types that in there, and they make a mistake and put top secret in, and suddenly you can't see it anymore. And then when you try to call back, of course, then the armed guards rush in and grab you and pull you out for trying to access top secret information. Customer and vendor models as well. When you're looking at dealing with, for instance, maybe a large manufacturing company who has dealers out in the field, and the dealers sell their products, and they want the dealers to be able to log into their help desk and say, this tractor has a broken whatever axle, and so I need to open a help desk ticket to get a replacement part for that tractor. And the tractor is really owned by the company that bought it, the dealer perhaps, or maybe it's not owned by the dealer. Maybe it's owned by the original manufacturer. And so you need to be able to track that kind of information. And so they put in capability within the product for people to customize and deal with situations like that. Financial institutions also have security implications. Things like, let's say it's a credit card company, is one everybody can identify with pretty easily. You call in and you say, I'm having trouble with my Visa card and my number is 999-99-99999. And they type that into your help desk ticket. Now any analyst at that company who has access to the tickets could pull it up and see that your card number was 999-99999. But in most of these cases, what I've seen is that people will write customizations to the Java object so that it will go through and recognize patterns and say, if it looks like a credit card number, it probably is a credit card number, and we change it to XXXXX so that that data is not there. And maybe, perhaps, even create a secondary record that could be linked to with authentication to actually pull back the record that has the actual number in it. This kind of shows about Websphere Security, and this is what most of the time that people are dealing with when they conceptually think of the security within the product. But everything else that we've talked about kind of lets you know that it's a lot bigger picture than just what's in Websphere. And very seldom is it as straightforward, even as what you see on the screen. But I'll kind of point out the components that I deal with a lot. First, you can see over here there's a user who is making an authentication request, and it's coming in with HTTP request. It's possible that this customer may also have a single sign-on solution. For instance, perhaps Kerberos. And this authentication request is going to be intercepted, and the interceptor is going to be responsible for doing the authentication of that Kerberos request, and then it will be handed back off to Websphere, in which case suddenly this picture doesn't look hardly anything like what it does now. But in this case, the straightforward version, Websphere is going to get that authenticated through what's called the Virtual Member Manager, which is VMM. And VMM is capable of federating multiple information sources. So you can have multiple LDAPs associated with VMM. Of course, Websphere has a very specific list of we support this, we support this, we support this, and we support this. And if you stray away from that list, then suddenly you have other problems, which I'll mention in just a second. But in this case, assuming that it's just a straight up LDAP that we're used to, Virtual Member Manager will pull those entries in, and it has a remote interface so that suddenly in Websphere you will see all those users that come from your LDAP source. So if it's Active Directory, for instance, that you synchronized with, or IBM Directory Server, all those entries that were in that definition that you've specified for the string, it's going to pull back those users that match that and pull them into VMM and then be able to use those within the product. One of the things that you'll recognize also in this drawing is that there is a CCMDB process runtime database. In this particular product slide, it happens to be from one of the products called CCMDB, but the product itself has a database of those users. And so those users need to come for authentication into WebSphere for VMM and then get handed off for authorization within the product. Those security roles and person groups and security groups that we saw, membership in those gets associated into the product through the LDAP interface. And so what we do to bring those in is we have what we call VMM cron task, so Virtual Member Manager cron task. And that cron task, periodically, however often you have it set to run, typically like every 15 minutes,